The Galactic Council Hall was older than Earth's written history. It floated within the core of an artificial ring world orbiting a neutron star, an impossible marvel built by hands long turned to dust. Inside, 1,000 species gathered beneath a ceiling of shifting stars, their empires represented by massive banners glowing in spectral hues. They had come not to debate war or peace. Today's session was largely ceremonial. The Council had invited its newest spacefaring civilization to attend, a novelty at best, an amusement at worst. That civilization was humanity. Attention! The AI steward's voice rang across the grand chamber, translated into dozens of tongues. Representatives of Earth entering. There was a flicker of motion, and then they walked in. 3 humans, 1 man in a formal suit of midnight blue, flanked by 2 aides. No ornamentation, no pomp. Their flag, a minimalist Earth symbol against a black backdrop, floated behind them like a ghost among nebulae. Ambassador Elias Ward led them, his expression unreadable. In the upper gallery, a Syrian diplomat leaned to his companion and whispered, "They still use biological nervous systems." How? Quaint. Laughter, soft and sharp, drifted like static in the air. The Corthan diplomat, a serpentine being wrapped in golden armor, didn't bother hiding his sneer. Ward said nothing as he approached his seat at the outermost ring, a position reserved for junior civilizations, far from the center, far from the core discussions. Symbolic, but pointed. The Grand Speaker, a photosynthetic being who resembled a walking crystal lattice, chimed gently, "Let us welcome the species designated Homo sapiens. May their time among the stars be enlightening." A few claps, more than a few stifled chuckles. The humans sat without reacting. "Ward's not going to bite, is he?" one of his aides muttered in a tight voice. "Not yet," Ward replied softly. His eyes scanned the room, not with awe, but with calculation. Every expression, every posture, every whisper tucked behind a diplomatic smile. He knew exactly what they saw when they looked at him. A primitive, a talking ape dressed in borrowed clothes, a novelty species from a backwater planet that had launched its first FTL ship barely a decade ago. They didn't know what humans were yet, but they would. "Let the council convene," the Grand Speaker announced, beginning the roll call of empires. One by one, representatives delivered updates, fleet deployments, economic growth, scientific breakthroughs. Then came the passive-aggressive remarks. The Avaraxi boasted of telepathic unification. The Elari flaunted their immortality and synthetic evolution. Each one subtly emphasized the traits humanity lacked, and as they spoke, they occasionally glanced toward Ward, waiting to see a reaction. They got none. Instead, Ward leaned back, hands folded, lips curled ever so slightly in a smile that wasn't warm. It was patient, calculated. Let them talk, he thought. Let them laugh. He wasn't here to impress them. He was here to deliver a message they'd never forget. And when he finally stood to speak, the galaxy would realize that humanity did not come to beg for a seat at the table. They came to flip the damn thing over if they had to. "Let us proceed to open dialogue," announced the Grand Speaker, its crystalline form glowing faintly blue. Ambassador Ward remained still, expression composed. Around him, the oldest powers in the galaxy began to speak, not to share, but to perform. Their words, like knives dipped in honey, slid through the air with well-practiced grace. Representative Silek of the Avaraxi Dominion was first. Her voice echoed telepathically, transmitted directly into minds. "We welcome Earth's participation, though we must acknowledge the mental strain you must be experiencing." Communicating through such crude vocalizations, a few delegates laughed aloud. Unfiltered, Ward offered her a polite nod. "We'll try to keep up." Then came the Syrian speaker, a floating bioluminescent entity that pulsed with every syllable. "It is inspiring that your species achieved spaceflight despite your planet's toxic atmosphere and unstable governments. Truly, adversity breeds innovation. Laughter again, this time from nearly half the chamber. They weren't even pretending to be subtle now. The Corthan representative leaned forward, voice a low hiss. Your species still uses internal combustion engines. You burn liquids to move. How? Charming. Ward's aide shifted beside him, jaw clenched. They're baiting us, she whispered. Ward didn't reply. His eyes remained locked forward. Then came the chairman himself, a being of living plasma, encased in a hovering containment sphere. The council chair had ruled the proceedings for over a century. Let us all extend our support to our human cousins, he said with mock solemnity. We remember when our own species first discovered the wheel, too. That drew a wave of laughter. Full-throated, condescending, delighted. Billions across the galaxy were watching the broadcast. Most saw humanity's presence as little more than a comedic interlude, an entertaining footnote to the day's true business. Already, memes and satirical clips flooded the interstellar nets. Ward allowed the room to settle. Then he rose. The movement was slow, measured, intentional. The laughter stopped, not out of respect, but curiosity, amusement, as one might give an animal that suddenly stood on two legs and began speaking Latin. He stepped to the podium and placed both hands on either side. Ambassador Elias Ward of the United Nations of Earth, he said clearly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, steady, calm, every word sharpened by restraint. First, allow me to thank you all for your warm welcome. It's rare that one can witness such unity among empires otherwise constantly on the brink of war. A few chuckles, fewer than before. Ward's gaze swept the chamber. It's also humbling to be reminded of how far behind we are. We don't have minds that speak without sound. We can't live for centuries. Our ships still burn fuel. And we still make mistakes. So many, in fact, that we had to build entire institutions just to survive our own learning curve. There was a pause. He smiled, but not kindly. And yet, here we are. Silence. Ward's voice dropped slightly. You call us primitive. But if that's true, then it begs one question. How did primitives find themselves sitting in your council? The silence stretched longer. Ward let it breathe. Let it fester. Then, with deliberate calm, he added, I'll tell you how. But I warn you, our path here wasn't pretty. And by the end, you may not be laughing. And just like that, the tone of the council shifted. For the first time, the galaxy leaned in to listen. Ambassador Ward didn't move for a moment after his final sentence. The chamber, once filled with smug amusement, had turned to stillness. Uncertain, off balance. It wasn't what he said that shifted the mood. It was how he said it. No raised voice. No threats. No outrage. Just calm, steady words sharpened by something older than diplomacy. Conviction. Let me tell you a story, Ward said, stepping away from the podium and slowly pacing the speaker's ring. We don't have the luxury of growing up in a galaxy where danger is a distant concept. Our danger was homegrown. We weren't guided by ancient precursors. We had no alien mentors handing down wisdom. Everything we have, we clawed out of the dirt with bloodied hands. He stopped, turned toward the Avaraxi and their smug crystal spires etched with 1,000 years of peace. You evolved on a world with no predators, no disease. Your telepathy gave you unity before you ever developed cities. Must have been nice. His tone was still polite, still calm. But his smile. That smile chilled the room. Not because it showed rage, because it didn't. It was the smile of a predator who didn't need to bare teeth to kill. Ward turned his gaze now to the serene, beautiful, long-lived beings who lived in endless, floating metropolises. Your ancestors floated on warm oceans, sustained by the tides. You say we come from chaos. You're not wrong. Earth was chaos. It still is. He gestured vaguely toward the stars, the council, the grandeur around him. You don't understand us because you never had to. You never had to survive global war, nuclear tension, ecological collapse. We nearly wiped ourselves out, more than once. Ward returned to the center, letting his gaze sweep the chamber. And yet, every single time, we pulled ourselves back. There it was again, that smile. Not triumphant, inevitable. You mock us because we're not like you, he continued, voice low. But we're not ashamed of our struggle. It defined us. Every scar, every failure, every brutal lesson taught us how to adapt faster, think harder, unify when it counted. His eyes found the council chair last. You think we don't belong here. But the truth is, none of you would survive what we've survived. Not because you're weak, but because you never had to be strong. Silence. Even the background hum of machinery seemed to hold its breath. The council chair finally stirred. Ambassador Ward, surely you're not suggesting that pain and violence are credentials for membership. Ward looked at him, not with defiance, but pity. I'm saying that if you don't know what it's like to face extinction and win, you'll never understand why you should be very careful mocking those who have. His words hung in the air, heavier than gravity. And in that moment, something ancient and primal passed through the chamber. Fear, maybe. Respect. That would come next, because the galaxy had just realized something chilling. The humans hadn't arrived late to the stars. They'd arrived prepared. Ward stood tall in the speaker's ring, his calm demeanor unwavering. Yet behind his eyes burned something deeper, older than any power represented in the council chamber. You want to understand us, he said, his voice echoing softly through the hushed hall. Then you need to understand the planet that made us. He raised a hand slowly, palm up, as if holding a globe no one else could see. Earth is not a gentle world. It never was. From the moment we emerge, we were prey. Clawed, fanged, venomous things hunted us. We ran, we hid, we adapted. He closed his hand into a fist. We became the predators. A flicker of unease crossed a few alien faces. War didn't stop. Our ancestors didn't evolve in peace. They learned war before they learned writing. They painted stories of death on cave walls with blood and ash. And when they finally rose above survival, what did they do? He let the silence hang. They turned that same fire inward. They made gods in their image and killed in their names. They built empires on bones. They split atoms. They wiped out cities in seconds. We are not noble. We are not enlightened. A heavy pause. We're experienced. The Ilari delegate, a shimmering construct of living data, projected a question directly into the air. And yet you survived. Ward nodded. We did. Not because we were better. Because we refused to stay broken. Again and again, we rebuilt. After every war, we reached further. After every fall, we stood taller. He walked slowly, passing by banners of ancient empires. You inherited peace. We forged it, not because we're wise, but because peace was the only thing we hadn't tried yet. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Gone was the condescension. What replaced it was harder to name. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. Ward turned back to the assembly. You mock our combustion engines, our short lives, our emotions, but those things aren't weaknesses. They're why we're still here. He pointed toward the ceiling, where a holographic galaxy slowly rotated, a map of empires, trade routes, borders carved in light. You see stability. We see cracks. He let that hang, then stepped back to center. My species doesn't fear the dark between stars, he said, voice quiet again. We were born in the dark. We made light, and we will carry that light with us, whether you invite us to your tables or not. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. And beneath that silence, in a dozen systems, broadcast screens glowed as millions of alien citizens leaned forward. This wasn't the image of humanity they'd been taught. This wasn't a fragile race of upstart primitives begging for relevance. This was a survivor species, hardened, tested, refined by fire. The kind of species that, if ever backed into a corner, wouldn't break. They'd burn everything around them until they were the last ones standing. And as that realization settled over the chamber like falling ash, Elias Ward gave them something even worse than a threat. He gave them truth. The grand chamber remained still. No rebuttals. No jokes. Ward had shifted the temperature of the room, and everyone felt it. But he wasn't done. He took a breath and spoke again, this time quieter, colder. "I can see it in your faces. You're wondering if we're dangerous." He let the words hang like smoke. "You should know. We wonder that too." A hushed murmur spread through the delegates, but none interrupted. Ward continued, stepping slowly, deliberately. "We look in the mirror, and sometimes we don't see heroes. We see Hiroshima. We see Auschwitz. We see firebombed cities and shattered nations. We see what we're capable of." His voice hardened. "But here's the difference between us and you." He stopped in front of the Korthan warlord, a being who led a fleet known for sterilizing moons in rebellion. "You bury your atrocities in classified archives. We teach ours in school." The Korthan's vertical pupils narrowed. Others shifted uncomfortably. "We force our children to learn the worst things we've done, not to glorify them, but so they never forget what happens when empathy dies." The Grand Speaker's crystalline form flickered uncertainly. "This is an unusual stance for a diplomat." Ward turned his gaze slowly. "That's because I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to warn you." He took a breath, steady and deep. "We're not just the species of Beethoven and Da Vinci. We're the species of Stalin and Pol Pot. And we know that. We carry that with us, always." A silence heavier than gravity settled over the chamber. No race reaches the stars without a shadow. We just chose to face ours. He looked out across the crowd, eyes steady. "You think we're monsters. Some of us are. But the difference is, we try to keep ours in cages." His voice darkened. "Pray they stay there." No one laughed. The chair's containment sphere dimmed slightly, his plasma form flickering. "You claim to walk with restraint, but speak as if you are on the verge of violence." Ward tilted his head. "We walk in peace, because we know what happens when we don't. Do you?" His words struck deeper than any weapon. Because he wasn't threatening war. He was revealing a truth none of them wanted to admit. They had mocked humanity because they assumed control. Assumed power. Assumed superiority. But now they were looking at something else entirely. A mirror. And what stared back at them wasn't a primitive race. It was a civilization that had clawed itself from the abyss and learned to smile with blood on its teeth. A species that had learned how to master its monsters by first becoming them. Elias Ward folded his hands behind his back, posture calm, voice almost gentle. "We didn't come here to pick a fight. We came here to learn. To cooperate. To grow." He leaned in slightly. "But if you think you can bully us, insult us, dismiss us, you've misread us entirely." And with that, he returned to his seat, quiet, composed, utterly unapologetic. Behind him, the Earth flag swayed ever so slightly. It wasn't there to represent hope. It was there to remind them what humanity had survived to get here, and that nothing, not even the galaxy, would ever break them again. The chamber remained quiet long after Elias Ward sat down. What was once a room of arrogant titans had turned contemplative, uncertain. The air buzzed, not with amusement, but tension. The kind that follows after someone casually walks into a den of lions and makes the lions wonder who really holds the leash. No one looked directly at the humans anymore. They stole glances instead, quick, measured, as if trying to recalculate everything they thought they knew. The Ilarian Void, composed entirely of data housed in a semi-organic core, initiated a private network stream with the others of its kind. The emotional volatility of humans is clearly weaponized. We underestimated the psychological dimension of their diplomacy. The Syrian delegation, once so fluid and graceful, now seemed unnaturally still. One of them whispered, "There's a hunger in them, not just for survival, for something more." Even the Korthan warlord, who once openly mocked humanity, sat back with arms crossed, staring at Ward as if trying to remember where he'd seen that expression before. He hadn't, because until now, no species in the galaxy had ever dared speak like that to the Council, and walked away unscathed. It was unprecedented. And worse, it worked. The chair finally activated his sphere's inner glow, his voice trying to regain control. The representative from Earth has spoken with passion. Let us not allow emotion to eclipse reason. But it was already too late. The seed had been planted, and it was growing. One of Ward's aides leaned over, whispering, "Did you mean to go that far, sir?" Ward didn't look at her. "We haven't gone far enough." The aide frowned. "They're not laughing anymore." Ward's lips barely moved. "Exactly. Because beneath the centuries of superiority, beneath the pomp and arrogance, the Galactic Council feared one thing more than war: unpredictability. And humans. Humans were chaos wrapped in skin. They advanced faster than any race on record. They reverse-engineered alien tech in months. They solved FTL without help. And now, they sat calmly in a room full of apex civilizations, without flinching. That wasn't bravado. That was confidence, earned the hard way. A quiet ping echoed in Ward's earpiece, a secure message from Earth Command. / new uplink from Andromeda Front approved. His jaw tightened slightly. So they were moving forward. The galaxy wasn't ready for what came next. But that was the point. He tapped the reply. "Stand by. Phase 2 begins after adjournment." Back in the chamber, the chair tried to shift focus to other speakers, attempting to steer the session back into familiar waters. Trade disputes, border clarifications, pirate incursions. But the room wasn't listening. Not really. Their thoughts were elsewhere, on Earth, on the species that had stared down a hall of demigods and called them cowards. And though none would say it aloud, they all thought the same quiet thought. If that's how they speak, how do they fight? No one laughed anymore. And that silence, that was humanity's first real victory. The council adjourned. Delegates filed out slowly, their usual grace dulled by something unfamiliar. Unease. Their aides whispered in hushed tones, glancing nervously at the humans. No one approached Ward or his team. No backhanded comments. No smug handshakes. Just distance. Exactly as planned. Back in their private diplomatic suite aboard the Council's orbital citadel, Ward removed his coat and draped it over the back of a chair. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of Earth-made electronics, quaint by galactic standards, yet surprisingly effective. His aide, Lion, finally broke the silence. "You didn't come here just to rattle cages." "No," Ward said, opening a sleek black case on the table. "I came here to show them what happens when you back a cornered species into a room full of kings." Inside the case was a cylindrical data core, polished to a mirror sheen, sealed with encryption that even Alari systems hadn't cracked. Lion's eyes widened. "It's that." Ward nodded. "Project Ashwake." Leon swallowed. "That wasn't supposed to leave Earth." "Until today," Ward said, placing it carefully into the projection slot. "Now's the time to show them what we really brought." A holographic interface burst to life above the table, lines of data scrolling faster than the eye could follow. Threat response algorithms, adaptive strategy matrices, real-time planetary simulations. War models, not for conquest, but for survival. Ward didn't turn to her. "They thought we came here begging for approval, for recognition, but we didn't come to join their club." He tapped a sequence into the display, and the simulation began. Dozens of star systems lit up in red. Defensive strategies evolved in real time. Scenarios unfolded, Corthan blockades, Cyrene subversion campaigns, even full council-wide sanctions. Every time, humanity adapted, survived. 1. We came to prepare. Leon stepped back, stunned. You built countermeasures for every major empire, all of them. Ward's voice was calm. We studied them for decades. Their tactics, their weapons, their history. While they were laughing at our combustion engines, we were building doctrine for a war we hope never comes. But if it does, he said quietly, we won't be starting from scratch. The door chimed. A signal from the Avaraxi delegation. Ward smiled faintly. They're the first to blink. He closed the projection, sealed the data core, and straightened his jacket. You know what the council fears most? He asked. Lion shook her head. A species they can't control. One that doesn't just survive the fire, but walks out of it with new tools. He headed for the door. We came here with 3 things. Our history, our monsters. He paused. And a plan. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing an Avaraxi envoy waiting with an unreadable expression. Ambassador Ward, it said carefully, if you have a moment, our high consensus would like to speak. Privately. Ward gave a cordial nod. Of course. Let's begin. Because this was never about earning a seat. It was about making sure everyone else realized the table now had a new shape. And Earth had already started carving the legs. 3 cycles had passed since Ward's speech shook the chamber. 3 cycles, and the galaxy was no longer the same. The council had reconvened, this time in full attendance. No delegates sent envoys. No dignitaries arrived late. Not anymore. Because now, every race wanted a clear look at the humans. At what they'd missed. Elias Ward sat in silence, flanked by 2 aides. His posture was as measured as ever, but this time, the weight in the room wasn't resistance. It was respect. Even the Grand Chair, who had once looked at Earth as a footnote, greeted Ward with a subtle incline of his shimmering form. Ambassador Ward, welcome back. Ward rose slowly, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. Thank you, Chair. I speak today not to restate our case, but to clarify our position. He stepped to the center once more. And this time, there was no laughter. Only eyes, ears, and systems focused entirely on him. When we first arrived, many of you looked at Earth and saw an anomaly. A volatile species. A storm. He nodded. You were right. He tapped a control on the platform, and a soft pulse activated a projection above the chamber. But there were no war simulations, no weapons, no fire. Only images, black and white photographs, old footage, humanity's pain and triumph, Auschwitz, Hiroshima, civil rights marches, the moon landing, starships rising from deserts, Mars terraforming colonies, children playing under the first dome on Titan. We were forged in chaos, he said quietly, but it taught us to see beauty where others saw ruin, to hope when logic said hope was dead. We don't rise despite adversity. We rise because of it. One of the Corthan generals leaned forward. Your race fears nothing. Ward turned his gaze on him. We fear ourselves. That's why we built a society around keeping our monsters in chains, and a democracy loud enough to hear when the chains rattle. A ripple moved through the chamber. Unspoken understanding. Ward continued. You fear us because we are different. And you should. But not because we seek conquest. We don't. He looked around the chamber, voice calm, even warm. We seek to stand beside you, to push you forward, just as we pushed ourselves. We didn't come to threaten. We came to wake you up. He paused. And if we had to rattle your thrones to do it, so be it. Silence again. But not hollow, not stunned. Moved. The Alari envoy flickered in acknowledgement. Earth's motion for council recognition passes by supermajority. One by one, banners of galactic empires lit up. Avaraxi, Serene, Corthin, Aelari, even the distant, enigmatic fringewalkers. Ward inclined his head, not in triumph, in solidarity. Because now they saw Earth for what it truly was. Not a threat, not a joke, but a reminder that the strongest voices don't always come from the oldest empires, but from the hungriest hearts. He turned to leave, but not before offering the galaxy one final message. "Mock us again," he said softly, "and we'll remind you, through words or worse, why you never should have in the first place." The chamber didn't clap. They stood, in silence, and Earth's flag stood among theirs at last, earned, not given.